Let's talk about something that people are yet to realize. Kelly Bundy was the secret weapon of Married with Children. And I'm not just talking about the obvious reasons that kept teenage boys glued to the screen in the late 80s and early 90s. When you think about Married with Children, you think about Al's misery, Peg's laziness, and Bud's desperate schemes. But Kelly was something different entirely. She was the heart of the show, and nobody seemed to notice. Here's the thing about the dumb blonde character. It's been done to death. It was already a tired trope when Married with Children premiered in 1987. But Christina Applegate didn't just play a dumb blonde. She created something far more interesting, far more nuanced, and ultimately far more essential to why the show worked for 11 seasons. Kelly Bundy was happy, and in a show built entirely on misery, resentment, and dysfunction, her happiness was revolutionary. Think about it. Al hated his job and his life. Peg was bored and unfulfilled. Bud was desperate and constantly rejected. But Kelly walked through life like she was the star of her own movie, and everyone else was just lucky to have a supporting role. She had confidence that bordered on delusion, and it was absolutely magnificent. The genius of Christina Applegate's performance was that she never played Kelly as stupid in a mean-spirited way. Kelly wasn't dumb because the writers wanted to mock her. She was simply living in her own reality, one where she was always right, always the center of attention, and always just fine. Thank you very much. She had a logic that made perfect sense to her, even if it made no sense to anyone else. And the show needed that. Married with Children was dark. It was cynical. It was built on the premise that the American dream was a lie and family life was a prison sentence. Every character was trapped in their own personal hell. Except Kelly. Kelly was free in a way none of them could ever be, because she was too gloriously unaware to realize she was supposed to be miserable. Let's talk about the family dynamics. Al and Peg's marriage was a war of attrition. Bud and Kelly fought constantly, with Bud's intellectual superiority constantly undermined by Kelly's social success. But when the family came together, when they actually functioned as a unit, it was almost always because of Kelly. She was the bridge. When Al needed to feel like a protective father, Kelly gave him that opportunity. When Peg needed to feel like a mother, Kelly was there. When Bud needed someone to scheme with or against, Kelly was the perfect foil. She connected the family in ways that weren't obvious, but were absolutely essential. Christina Applegate's comedic timing was impeccable. The way she could deliver a completely nonsensical line with absolute conviction. The way she could physicalize the character's scattered thought process. The way she could go from 0 to 100 in a heartbeat. She made Kelly three-dimensional in a way that the dumb blonde archetype rarely allowed. And here's what really sets Kelly apart. She evolved without changing. That sounds contradictory, but stay with me. Over 11 seasons, we saw Kelly as a high school student, a struggling actress, a model, a spokesperson, a weather girl. She had jobs and boyfriends and dreams, but she remained fundamentally Kelly. She didn't have a special episode where she suddenly became smart or learned a valuable lesson. She stayed exactly who she was, and the show respected that. Compare that to how other sitcoms treated similar characters. They'd eventually give them a makeover episode, or have them go to college and become serious, or find their one true love and settle down. Kelly did none of that. She remained unapologetically herself from the first episode to the last, and that consistency was part of what made the show work. The relationship between Kelly and Al is particularly fascinating. On the surface, Al was embarrassed by his daughter's lifestyle and choices, but underneath, there was genuine love and protection. Some of Al's most heroic moments on the show came when Kelly was threatened or hurt. The shoe salesman who couldn't be bothered to help his own family would move mountains for his daughter when it really mattered, and Kelly loved her father back in her own way. She saw him as the greatest man alive, conveniently forgetting all his failures and flaws. To Kelly, Al was a hero, a champion, a father who could do no wrong, and Al needed that belief from someone, anyone, even if it came from a daughter who could barely remember his name some days. Christina Applegate brought vulnerability to Kelly that elevated her beyond the stereotype. Yes, she was gorgeous and played that up for comedy, but there were moments where you could see Kelly's genuine emotions, her real feelings beneath the ditzy exterior. She wasn't just a cartoon character. She was a person who happened to move through the world differently than everyone else. The show's writers recognized what they had in Applegate and gave her increasingly complex material as the seasons went on. Kelly's job at the DMV, her various career aspirations, her relationships with genuinely interesting men who saw past her appearance to her unique personality. These weren't throwaway plots. They were opportunities to explore what made Kelly special. Let's be honest, Married with Children could be cruel. It trafficked in insult comedy and often punched down. But it never punched down at Kelly. Not really. The show laughed with her, not at her. Her happiness, her confidence, her complete lack of self-awareness wasn't presented as pathetic. It was presented as a superpower. In a family of cynics, Kelly was an optimist. In a house full of schemers, Kelly was genuine. In a show about people trapped by their circumstances, Kelly was the only one who was truly free. She didn't want to escape the Bundy household. She didn't dream of a better life. She thought her life was already pretty great. And maybe she was right. Christina Applegate's performance as Kelly Bundy deserved more recognition than it received. She took a character that could have been one-note and forgettable and turned her into something iconic. Kelly wasn't just the hot daughter on a controversial sitcom. She was a fully realized character with her own logic, her own worldview, and her own essential role in making the show work. Without Kelly, Married with Children would have been too dark, too mean, too hopeless. She was the light in all that darkness, the joy in all that misery, the love in all that dysfunction. She was, whether anyone realized it at the time or not, the beating heart of the Bundy family. And that's why, 30+ years later, we still remember Kelly Bundy. Not just because she was beautiful, but because she was happy. And in the world of Married with Children, that made her the most radical character of all.